Biography of the late Abu Mayanja, a friend, a colleague, and to us, our father. This has been a labor of love and the work of many years in the offing. It is now coming to 19 years since we lost our dear father, and Professor Kasos will tell us what indeed that labor has been. I think it's been a labor of something a little bit over 10 years. My task is to welcome you first and foremost, but also take the opportunity to introduce members of the family that are present. And I shall begin with our mothers, and I'll proceed to our siblings that I'll ask to stand at once in order for us to save some time. Let me begin by introducing our mothers that are present, starting with OHT Hajat Mariam Mayanja, Minister at Bengo, followed by Hajat Hadija Nabawanuka, and finally, Hajat Amina Nakalita. You will excuse me for wanting to make sure I've not left anybody out. I will now proceed to introduce my siblings, and I shall ask that you all stand up at once in the interest of time. Those that are in the room, please do stand up for recognition. Amongst those that have stood up, I would like to single out two members of the Luchiko of Buganda who represent OHT, who represent the Sabasajja as youth representatives in the Luchiko. The rest of you, please stay seated, take your seats so that we can focus on OHT Omar Mayanja and OHT Isakacha. Thank you. It goes without saying that everybody in this room is extremely special. This is an event that has been organized by ourselves as a family with your help and your support, and you're all special by default. However, allow me to single out a few people that I would like to mention that especially for us as a family have been there with us and for us over the years. Let me begin by introducing Hajat Rehema Chigundu, Auntie Remy, who we know is the wife of the late Dr. Sulaiman Chigundu, and right next to him, Sula Chigundu Jr. himself. I'd also like to introduce those that have become my foster parents in English, but in more ways than one. Allow me to introduce in a special way the Honorable Mweswa Rukutana, our father-in-law and dear friends of the family. Thank you. And alongside that, allow me to also introduce in a special way the Honorable Sam Kutesa, who has been a pillar for us as well. Thank you very much. I had a lot of things to say about my late father, but time does not permit us to get into it. And in fact, I realize now that I may have to personally organize an event for myself to say everything I'd ever loved to say about him. But I think very, very briefly, to paint a picture, because I think hopefully what we'll hear this evening shall paint a picture about Abu Mayanja, the politician, the statesman, the parliamentarian, the public figure that you saw. But I also know that for many of you in the room, you also knew the social side of him, and what we saw as a family was an accomplished, knowledgeable, and highly socially capable and sociable person who traversed the entire fabric of society in our country. He was comfortable in Buganda, his homeland, and within the Muslim community that form his constituents and base. But when you found him associating with others, with the bishops, with others in society, he was equally at home with them. And that level of accomplishment was an example for us and something that we continue to seek to emulate. But as a private person in our home, it's difficult to say because we spent most of our time running away from him. He was a typical African father, and as soon as we grew up, we saw him as a tough father and one that was obviously taking responsibility for us and raising us in those days. But we also saw a lot of love in him. And I think it took me until about the age of 15 or 16 for my father to say, "Bana bange mbagala nnyo." but we knew it already instinctively. And it's such a challenge now that we're fathers in our own right, to seek to impart and imbibe that feeling. Our fathers in that generation were not the sort of fathers that took you to school, took you to soccer games, but nevertheless were able to imbibe and live a firm feeling that was unshakable. And to this day, that love continues to shine through us as individuals and as a family. And for that, we're eternally grateful. Our father was born in Mokopi, in a village called Buga. And I know many of you traveled with him on so many journeys and had so many occasions to interact with him. I don't know whether many of you have been to Buga or can point it out on the map, but it's in Chagwe, in the heart of Buganda. But he rose to such prominence that is extraordinary and difficult to imagine happening again in this day and age. My brother Habib likes to joke that Buga has not changed since the days of our grandfather, the late Abdallah Kachama, that if he was to rise from his grave, he would find his way home without being lost for a minute. But from that backwater, he rose to national prominence and international prominence through perhaps industry, but the enabling factor was really education. And that is something that he inculcated in us, and I believe that is a lasting legacy that he gives to this nation. The power to transform one's life, one's society through education. And I'm pleased, especially pleased that Chibuli Secondary School has managed to send through a number of students that I hope will get to learn about a man that walked shoes similar to theirs to get to where he got to. My father's first journey to King's College, Buddha, was mostly on foot. Having aced the primary living examinations of his year and emerged the top student, he was invited to an interview at King's College, Buddha. And he tells a story of how they rose very early in the morning, and after offering the morning prayer, they packed up, and his father said to him, "Let's go and catch the bus before it's too late." They then walked to the main road, and as soon as they got there, his father said to him, "What's the point of waiting? We might as well walk. Wherever they meet us along the way, we'll continue. We'll just get onto the bus." And so they walked, and along the way, the bus came along. They flagged it down, and his father asked, "How much is the fare?" And the driver told him a fare that he knew very well. He said, "I think we can continue walking, we'll find something cheaper." So they continued to walk in the hope that they'll find transportation. And all the while, and I want to paint a picture for you, and those of you that are old enough will be able to imagine what that looked like. Because they left home at the crack of dawn. My grandfather was wearing shoes, my father was barefooted, and they were carrying luggage that involved whatever he used, my grandfather used as beddings, as well as a zinzimia, which is something that looks like a kettle. It's between a kettle and a jerry can that people in those days used for ablution, and a few other personal items. And so they walked away from Ngogwe to a place called Wantoni, near Mukono, which is a distance of about 30 kilometers, and today, according to Google Maps, it will take about 7 hours to walk if you're a brisk walker. That is the journey to get to Kampala. They eventually go into public means and go to Kampala, wherein they spent the night. And the story goes on and on. It's an interesting story. Did the interview, passed the interview, went to Budo, and as they say, the rest is history. The rest really is in the book which you've bought, and I hope that you'll find about time to read. But those are the humble beginnings of Ab Mayanja. But what I'd like to say, above all, beyond the love that he instilled in us, that he showed us, was the love that he had for all of you. And we saw that in the way that the regard and respect that he spoke about all of his friends, all his contemporaries, the awe in which he held all of you was electric, and was something that affected us. And that is why when we have an opportunity such as this, we do our best to look for you, and we hope that we have done a reasonable job of doing that. Our chief guest, I really don't want to, I could go on and on, as you can see, but I think I have one day the energy and the creativity and the ability to invite you so that I can talk and talk and talk as much as I can about my father. Allow me to end these remarks by thanking you all for coming, and also relating to that we did have a lot of people that could not come for different reasons, others out of the country, and we received a number of apologies, and therefore I think it's only fair that I read out a few of those, including Professor Mahmoud Mamdani, former Chief Justice Benjamin Odochi, prominent journalists Robert Kabsheng and Andrew Mwenda. I think I'll stop at those ones. I want to thank you once again for joining us, and I hope that you have a brilliant evening this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uthman, for the welcome remarks, the appreciation, and also that side of Abu Mayanja that you've given us from the perspective of his family. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now invite OHT Daudi Mpanga, who is going to talk about Abu Mayanja from the political and legal perspective.
The honorable guest of honor, distinguished guests, please permit me to say all protocol observed, because we are in very august and polite society. I might have to recite very many names and honors before being able to get to what I've been asked to do. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today. And indeed, two things when Uthman gave me a call to ask me to speak, I couldn't say no, but two things immediately came to my mind. The first was a story I was told by my late mother about the eulogy that the great Abu Mayanja, in whose honor we're here today, gave on the passing of my father. He said that Fred Mpanga was the last gentleman in Uganda, and he was mourning for Ugandans who would live, I think he was paraphrasing Plato, Ugandans who would live in a world that doesn't have gentlemen like Fred Mpanga. I believe actually one of the greatest hallmarks of a gentleman is modesty. Abu Mayanja was a very modest man, and I believe a great gentleman, testament of which our presence here surely gives. The second thing that I thought about was Uthman and I were invited last year, I believe in 2022, when Uganda turned 60. Some academics, led by Professor Derek Peterson, organized a debate or a panel discussion. The first panel had people who had lived to see the 1962 independence. I believe that panel was led by now the late Dr. Martin Aleka. It had Professor Olwenyi, it had Mama Mary Obote, and it had my mother, Joyce Mpanga, all of whom had witnessed independence, and they talked about their expectations, their hopes, their dreams, and what had come of them. The second panel had the children of people who had been at the forefront of things in 1962. And that panel had the Honorable Jimmy Akena, son of the late Apra Milton Obote. It had the Honorable Chiwanuka, his first name just escapes me, he's now an ambassador, the son of the late Ben Chiwanuka. It had Uthman Mayanja, the son of the late great Abu Mayanja, and it had me. And somebody wrote on Twitter, on the social media, as they do tongue-in-cheek, that these are the sons of the Gamba Nogus of 1962. So as a son, as a son of one of the Gamba Nogus of 1962, it's a great honor and privilege to be here to talk about the celebrated Abu Mayanja, a gentleman, politician, lawyer, who wore many identities and wore them comfortably. That, to my mind, is one of the greatest contributions that he made to the politics of Uganda, to society in Uganda. He was a Muganda, he was a Ugandan, a Muslim, a scholar, a lawyer, a politician, a humorist, and as we just heard, a father. He was perfectly at home and comfortable in Ngogwe, speaking to peasants, in Chagwe, as he was in King's College Budo, associating with the children of the Gamba Nogus of that time, and also as he was in Cambridge, all in a very short time, if you think about it in terms of linear progression. within 20 years, he'd gone from Ngogwe to Cambridge, 20-something years. He was dining with peasants and then advising kings and advising presidents in a lifespan less than 30, 35 years. These are very impressive things, and very impressive things largely because of the size of his intellect. But in this book, A.B.K. Kasozi does a lot of justice to the man, because he brings out all of these various identities, the facets of his identity, and how they came together to form Abu Mayanja, the person we admired, loved, and respected in great measure. It's from this book, for example, that I learned that his mother was a Catholic. I didn't know that until I got this book, and I got this book this morning. So it's also quite easy to read and to read quickly. Perhaps that explains straddling two identities that were then, had just maybe less than 100 years, been the driver of civil war in Buganda during the religious wars. So you had the Muslims fighting with the Protestants, fighting with the Catholics, with each having a faction supporting it, supposedly about the worship of the same Abrahamic God. But a person who was born of these two identities was probably born to be a unifier, was raised to be comfortable with various identities and trying to find ways of bringing them together. And we see this, the way Dr. Kasozi has brought it out, by the various contributions that he made to the post-colonial state that he imagined that would emerge. And I'll talk about that in a minute. From his contributions to the search for political organization, his life in the UNC, a lot of the leaflets, a lot of the propaganda leaflets that were actually written by Abu Mayanja. Not just because he was the only person who was literate, but most likely because he was the most able to articulate the ideas in ways that could sell them to very many people. Abu Mayanja, working as a public servant for Buganda and Uganda, as a junior minister in Mengo for education, eventually as a minister in the central government, again shows you his ability to move from one area seamlessly into another, wearing various identities and being an intersection for all of these. His political activism, right from striking in Budo about the positioning of the portrait of the Kabaka below that of King George, through to the very famous and very well-known strike in 1952 at Makerere, which led him to be expelled. And then perhaps his expulsion giving him the opportunity to go to Cambridge, do the bar, and then come back. All of these things show Abu Mayanja, very young, but already contributing at a national level. And perhaps if he had been born in a different time, he would have gone from the national into the regional and further up. And as Frantz Fanon said, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission and fulfill it or betray it. I believe the greatest challenge that faced the generation into which Abu Mayanja was born, the Gen Zs of that time, if you like, was the all-present Western imperialism, Western global imperialism, which at that time was in its colonialist stage. Faced with a colonial government, you can see that his awareness of what needed to be done was there quite early. King's College Budo must have been a teenager. He's already complaining about why is the picture of a foreign king above that of my king? Why am I a subject of foreign domination? That higher level of understanding and a quick conceptualization of the issue, the issues facing them, is actually brought out immediately on page 1, on page 3. I encourage you all to read this book tonight, where Professor Kasozi says, in most of his political activities, speeches and writings, Mayanja exhibited a higher level of understanding of the challenges that faced Uganda, the post-colonial state, than his contemporary politicians. Those Ugandan founding fathers, politicians, faced complex political, economic, and social challenges that were on many occasions beyond their intellectual capacities to comprehend. The political challenges included creating a participatory political system that would guarantee peace and give African peoples the freedom colonialism was accused of taking away, maintaining the unity and integrity of the state in the face of competing tribal and subnational forces, and building mechanisms for the peaceful transfer of power. The economic challenges included the establishment of a viable national economy, which would be the basis of unity and raising the standards of living of the people. The social challenges included proper administration of justice and efficient delivery of public services. A fairly long chunk, but I just wanted to bring out the fact that Abu Mayanja was very clearly one of the people who understood that and understood the size of the challenge quite immediately. And indeed, the size of his intellect reminds me of an anecdotal. I rifled through the book, it must be there somewhere, but I rifled through a book looking for it. The anecdotal story of Abu Mayanja speaking about, in Parliament, about the submission that had been made by a fellow MP. And he said, he's reported to have said, "Honorable Speaker, the honorable member does not have the brain of have the brain of a squirrel." At which point there was an objection to unparliamentary language. You'll forgive me, these were the days much, much before anybody thought certain words would be said in Parliament. So describing somebody as having the brain of a squirrel was deemed to be unparliamentary language, and the Speaker ruled that the Honorable Abu Mayanja should withdraw that statement and make an apology. So the Honorable Abu Mayanja is supposed to have said, "Right Honorable Speaker, I apologize. The Right Honorable Member does not have the brain of a squirrel." So very clearly, his intellect was much higher, which unfortunately sometimes is a problem. Because if you're working in an area where many people are not at your level, you will find that you see things far more clearly. You're forced to either operate at a lower level or end up what might be called insulting your fellow members. And indeed, it was said, and Professor Kasozi talks about it here, that due to his oratory and speaking capacity, a few people jokingly referred to Mayanja as Uganda's Edmund Burke. And of course, those few people must have been Englishmen, because Edmund Burke was known to be one of the most eloquent parliamentarians in the United Kingdom. And of course, this being a Westminster system, describing a Ugandan as the Edmund Burke of Uganda was supposed to be a compliment. Perhaps Edmund Burke was the Abu Mayanja of the United Kingdom. Abu Mayanja made great contributions to a number of important debates of the day. In all matters that were important, Abu Mayanja was to be found at the forefront. And indeed, during the 1966 gold scandal debate, Mayanja, as Professor Kasozi points out here, prophesied that corruption would lead to the destruction of the state. As the reader will find out, Mayanja was the first parliamentarian to propose that public officers declare their wealth before taking office. Abu Mayanja lived much, much before the Parliament exhibition, but I'm sure his words were born out of an intellectual capacity that could foresee things as they could develop, and perhaps, unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity, or wasn't listened to sufficiently in order that we could prevent ourselves from getting into that problem. To summarize and run a little faster, aside from his contributions to Parliament, Abu Mayanja was a lawyer, and he wasn't afraid to use the law as a tool for furthering political ends and furthering the ends of freedom. Indeed, when I saw Professor Oloko Onyango this evening, I was very happy, because Professor Onyango gave an eloquent lecture on the ghost of a case called Ex parte Matovu. The lawyers in the room will be familiar with it immediately. It's a very important case in constitutional law, taught in every university in the world where constitutional law is based on English common law. And that case arose out of the case of one Matovu, who was the Pokino, as I believe, and who was detained initially under the Deportation Act in 1966, after the violent overthrow of the Constitution, 1962 Constitution, and who then, having been released, I think, on certain orders, was redetained under the Emergency Act. Abu Mayanja represented him, and Abu Mayanja filed for habeas corpus, which is an order that he be presented to court from wherever he's detained. Of course, he must have known that the 1966-67 Constitution had abolished habeas corpus, and he made this case as a test for the judges to have to determine whether, in fact, the overthrow of the 1962 Constitution was legal or not. In a judgment that was given by Saudo Doma, the Chief Justice then, it was held that, in fact, under the Kelsenian, let me not trap myself. Professor Lokonyango will come and talk about whether it was Kelsen or somebody else. But there is a jurisprudential basis upon which revolutions are recognized if they're effective, and the law then presumes that the revolution took place and determinations will not be made in vain. But this case went all the way to the Privy Council in England, which was then the final court of appeal for Uganda. And although it was upheld, the Udo Doma's judgment was upheld, Abu Mayanja'S determined effort at bringing this argument brought out very important principles. From a local case, it became a matter that was cited in various Commonwealth countries as coups and revolutions began to roll out. Post-colonial states began to get into the coup phase. It was considered in a case in Rhodesia, as it then was, Zimbabwe, Madzimabuto and Ladnaburg versus Ladnaburg. I believe it was also considered in a case in Fiji, whose name escapes me. And the Fijian case is the only case, I understand, in which Abu Mayanja'S argument in Ex parte Matovu won the day. And it is said it only won the day because the coup makers, although they'd succeeded in initially bringing the coup, by the time the judge got down to write, the Australian Navy and Marines had come to overturn the coup. So the judge there felt brave enough to say, in fact, it's illegal to overthrow governments in this way, and held in favor of Abu Mayanja. But his legal prowess, Abu Mayanja'S legal prowess, created a precedent that has resounded across the Commonwealth. Moving very quickly, and finally, aside from directly in the legal landscape, as an MP, as a minister, as a legal advisor to a particular rebel group, Abu Mayanja has had a hand in shaping the legal and political landscape of Uganda. As you'll see in the book, he was one of the people who wrote many pamphlets on the constitution of Kabaka Yekka. He was also one of the people who wrote the constitution of the UNC. He was also one of the people who wrote or drafted, had an input in the 1962 Constitution. He was also one of the people who had a hand in the drafting of the 1985 Nairobi Peace Agreement. And it's great to see another one of the draftsmen of that, the Honorable Sam Kutesa, and I believe the Honorable Mama Mbabazi must have been somewhere in there, reviewing, writing, drafting with him at that time in Nairobi. He was also one of the people who had a hand in the drafting of the 1995 Constitution. So in one lifespan, 1929 to 2005, the Honorable Abu Mayanja from Ngogwe, through King's College Budo, to Makerere, to Cambridge, Parliament, and on, has shaped a number of the things that we all take for granted. The unity of Uganda, the pride in our diversity, personified several identities effortlessly, and in doing so gave an example of quite how someone can run, live, and let live, and enable others to thrive in much the same way as he has, providing opportunity for the least advantaged in order that they too may come and shine. The words that I'd love to leave with our audience here is that this book is not so much a biography as an academic study. And as Dr. Kasozi says, rightly, that the history of Uganda, and dare I say the history of Africa, should not be viewed entirely through the lenses of dictators. I think there's a worldwide movement of getting history moved away from remembering the names of kings, the names of rulers, the names of battles, dates of key battles and the like, and trying to get history to be understood as perhaps delayed news, seen through the eyes and through the works and actions of a number of ordinary human beings, extraordinary human beings, and I'd categorize Mayanja in the latter. If we can look at Mayanja'S life and read it to understand how youths faced with the great injustice of foreign domination, segregation, discrimination, how they reacted, how they acted, what they did, why they did what they did, we may understand better what needs to be done in this situation that we're faced with and future situations that we're faced with. Because as it's said by Kelly Hayes, everything feels unprecedented when you haven't engaged with history. If we engage with the history of Abu Mayanja, we'll be better able, I submit, to resolve a number of the problems that face us today and live the happy, prosperous, and good life all Ugandans, East Africans, and Africans as he envisioned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Owechitiibwa Daudi Mpanga, for that insightful review of the biography of Abu Mayanja. Ladies and gentlemen, would like to recognize the presence of Professor Oloka Onyango, Professor Kakumba, the Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dr. Sebumba from the Islamic University in Uganda, the Deputy Speaker of the Buganda Luchiko, again Owechitiibwa Mariam Mayanja, Owechitiibwa Robert Serwanga, Owechitiibwa Amis Kakomo, Owechitiibwa Kotilda Nakate, Omukungu Zake, the Deputy PS, the Kingdom of Buganda, Captain Jesse Roy, Owechitiibwa Mansur Simba Bunya, who is a parent and in-law in the family of Abu Mayanja. Once again, we welcome all of you to this event. Up next, we shall have, I'm inviting Professor Ebike Kasozi, the author.
Thank you very much. At 82, you'll forgive me. It's very difficult for me to climb these steps. Honorable guest of honor and former government top officials from the central government and from Mengo, I am very honored to be here to talk about what I have written, I guess. Now, there is something I want to explain. On the cover of the book, you see the word struggle for independence is put in bracket, in inverted commas. And the reason is this, that Ugandan politicians, despite what they say, independence was given to them on a mat. They never struggled. It wasn't like Zimbabwe, it wasn't like Kenya. If you want to get what happened, you should read Karugire's book. Karugire believes that Uganda was frog-marched into independence. And I believe he's right. I'm grateful to the family of Abu Mayanja, especially Mrs. Mariam Mayanja, and of course, Hadija Mayanja, for asking me to write this biography of their beloved person who was very difficult to love, but very nice in many cases. I'm also grateful to Mr. Uthman Mayanja, who supported the project financially, assisted me in many ways, and including finances. I'm also grateful to Prince Kasim Nachivinge for the support that he gave in writing this book. I'm also very grateful to many workers in the National Archives in London, where I spent more than a month researching this work, in the librarians at Cambridge University, and the workers in the Library of Congress in Washington, and our own archivists in Wandegea. For them, I'm grateful. Finally, I'm grateful to my wife, Kate. Maybe you could stand up. And my children, Kawalia, Ramla, Sophia, and others who helped me to write this book. As Mr. Panga has said, Abu Mayanja'S life really mirrors the political journey of Uganda since independence, or just before and after independence. And as it is known, I would like you to forgive us, historians, for the reason we study history is not to criticize the present. The reason we study history is to understand the present and speculate, and I repeat, on what is likely to happen. We only speculate given the data we have. A historian, unlike a reporter, makes judgments and events he describes. You have to put your own stamp. He selects and addresses data based on his understanding of the events he narrates. That's why each historian or commentator of the past addresses past events very differently. Further, historians can only tell a few aspects of what happened. Therefore, and I do apologize to the Mayanja family, that it was very difficult for me to select from the thousands of data that I got on Mayanja. For example, the Hansard, the parliamentary records. I think Mayanja has more than 250,000 pages of speeches in Parliament concerning various things. The study of Mayanja'S life reveals a few triumphs and difficulties in the construction of the Uganda post-colonial state. He contributed so much to Ugandan society that I ask you to buy and read his biography. I called him the intellectual star of Uganda's road to independence because of the following 10 reasons. First, as Mr. Mpanga has said, Mayanja exhibited a high level of understanding of the challenges that the post-colonial state would face and indeed faced than any of his contemporaries, the so-called founding fathers of Uganda. Second, he defined and had a clearer idea of the nature of that state, which Uganda was to become. Third, he was the brain for many of the documents that formed the administrative ideas and the laws of post-colonial Uganda. Fourth, he wrote more documents in the form of articles and monographs than any other person, not only politicians or academics. There are very few of us in universities that have written more than 300 pieces. And if you look at the back of the book, you will find the publications that Mayanja did. Now, he conceptualized the construction of the 1962 Constitution by bringing Saidwa Mutesa and Obote together, first at Bamananika, and later on, of course, in London. He was the most prolific speaker in Parliament from 1964 to 1974. Some of us who have gone through these answers, you think Mayanja was the only speaker who knew what it was all about. Of course, his performance at school was remarkable. I looked at them and I said, a man who would get 6 out of 6 is somebody you have to respect because many people pass with 20s, 25, and they are still in first grade. Eighth, unlike other politicians, Mayanja was not corrupt. He did not use his office to enrich himself. And I think that's something that we have to learn. He was a full-time politician who dedicated his life to public service, and he was not a briefcase politician. And I think that's quite important. Lastly, and most important, he spoke his mind whenever he felt something was wrong. His critique of the 1967 Constitution in the transition is one of the most important documents, historical documents of this country. It ranks like Archbishop Chiwanuka's pastoral letter, which he wrote when the Kabaka was founded. However, Mayanja, like many Baganda politicians of the time, did not focus on the importance of the role of violence in the control and management of the state, because the instruments of coercion became the legitimators of power in many African countries. So what were his main ideas? I think for politicians, maybe not, for historians, maybe not politicians and lawyers, ideas are very important because they form the basis of our actions. What were Mayanja'S political ideas? I will not discuss his social ideas because those were many. Now, after reading all these documents, I believe these were the ideas that produced the amount of work that he was able to publish. First, Mayanja believed that nations or communities are bound together by values specific to those communities. Those values form the basis of the cement that holds people together. Something that what Ibn Khaldun called Asabiya, and later on Rousseau termed the general will. 2, fundamental laws of society, and I hope the lawyers would agree with me on this. Fundamental laws of society are crafted from these values and concepts. For Mayanja, therefore, the major source of law in an African state in the people's concepts of justice should be based and emerge from the African society. For that matter, in Parliament, one day he opposed the introduction of trial by jury. And this was introduced by the Minister of Justice, and it was to start in Karamoja. So Mayanja stood up and said, how could you introduce a system that has been rejected where it was born in England? How do you expect people who raid the cattle to use trial and the jury when they are deciding cases? And it shows how, how straightforward he was. So, according to Mayanja, any society, any group of people to get together must agree in writing. And this is the constitution the previous speaker mentioned. According to Mayanja, he advocated a constitution that would not only be the supreme law of the state, but also the people's agreement on how they would like to be governed. As a result, Mayanja participated in the making of almost all constitutions that Uganda has gone through, and Mr. Mpanga has narrated them. I will not repeat them. For Mayanja, therefore, the constitution was important. But then he thought that the underlying philosophy of any constitution was that all people were equal before the law. That was the taproot of his belief. He preferred a constitution that permitted the creation of a government that was strong enough to govern, but sufficiently moderate to guarantee, or to be forced to guarantee, the freedoms and the rights of citizens. These freedoms and the rights included liberty, government by consent of the governed, equality before the law, freedom of expression, and the right to private property. He, however, stressed that the individual needs the state to gather these rights. While we can claim for rights and freedoms, the state is necessary to protect these rights. You need the state. So he never contradicted. Mayanja'S views were influenced by his desire to live in a liberally managed state in the John Lockean tradition. He believed that the role of the state is to protect and enhance the rights and the freedoms of the individual. Reading his more than 300 newspaper articles and journals, I have concluded that he sought, or he wanted, the creation of a liberal democratic state in the land of his birth. And in a liberal democratic state, it's the people who govern and who direct how things should go. Now, on unity, he's been criticized and equated with sub-nationalists, that he desired to break the Uganda state. That is not quite true, as you read. He believed in the oneness and the integrity of the Ugandan state, but he desired a type of unity that was not uniformity. Unity, but not uniformity. For him, therefore, a confederation of the regions of Uganda, rather than their total integration into one state, was the most practical at the time of independence because of the unequal development of the area and the differences in our cultures. He feared that total unity would make Uganda as disorganized as the Congo became after independence. Instead, he told Parliament that look at Switzerland. Uganda had a chance to become a Switzerland or a Congo, and there was no midway house. You either are a Congo or you are a Switzerland. And for us who lived here from 1962 to 85, we know that we were no better than the Congolese. So he saw government as the power of the state that is constituted by the people to carry out certain functions. These functions include guarding the security of the state and guaranteeing the rights of citizens. So on the one hand, you guard the state because everybody needs the state to keep the rights. But at the same time, you must not violate the people's rights. He thought that the administration of justice, therefore, was the most important function of a government. So in his speeches and writings, Mayanja warned the post-colonial state managers of the corrosive nature of greed and the sidestepping laws to enrich oneself. As mentioned, he's the one who introduced the Declaration of Wealth Act. So he served in many governments, as has been said, but he served with a purpose. He did not go to eat, and he didn't die a rich man. Actually, he died a poor man. So I would like you to go through this book, and I thank the guest of honor, Prince Kakungulu, former ministers, for having listened to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ebike Kasozi, for taking on this initiative to write a biography about Abu Mayanja. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize Honorable Shatsi Musherure Kutesa, who is with us here. Honorable Ken Luchamuzi, the man. Miss Mercy Kainobwisho, the Executive Director, Uganda Registration Services Bureau. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Moses Gava on behalf of the Gava family. I would like to recognize the Sava Woleriza Attorney General, the Buganda Kingdom, Oweekitiibwa Christopher Bwanika. I would also like to recognize Oweekitiibwa Mulwanya Muli, again, the former Katikiro of Buganda. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a small bag on the table. You may be wondering what is there, but it's a gift pack. This gift pack has, I'm told it's aroma sachet, a perfume. Okay, in simple terms, a perfume you can put in your wardrobe, in the cupboards. There is also a statement, there is a bookmark. I think it was prepared for you as you read the book. There's a bookmark which has one of the sayings or quotes from Abu Mayanja, which says, ultimately, democracy does not reside in the constitution, but in the hearts and minds of the people. And that is courtesy of Mayanja Candles, the baby, Sauda Mayanja. I would like to thank her, to recognize her for the decoration and the gifts that we've received. We'd also like to recognize Abazukuru under the 1921 Lifestyle, the company that has decorated the table with flowers. We'd also like to recognize the Islamic University in Uganda for the contribution towards the publishing of this book. In a special way, we would thank our patron, Prince Kasim Nachibinge, for the support towards the production, the printing, the writing of this book, and the Young Men's Muslim Association for the financial support towards the publication of the biography. Following those recognitions, the next item that we are going to have some members of the audience, distinguished guests, who are going to say something in that part of the discussion about Abu Mayanja. As you'll see or recognize or note from the people who are going to be talking, you'll see the landscape, how diverse Abu Mayanja was. So we shall have Mr. Kabatsi.
I had the opportunity, privilege, and pleasure to work with the late Honorable, or Right Honorable Abu Mayanja in the early part of the 90s when he was Attorney General and Minister of Justice, and also a Deputy Attorney General, a Deputy Prime Minister. I'm told I can only speak for a couple of minutes. Let me quickly say that as his Solicitor General and his Permanent Secretary, he was a pleasure to work with. He was a very intelligent man, extremely intelligent. And I enjoyed everything he did and he said intellectually. I found him to be a very passionate man. Everything he did passionately and truthfully. He was passionately a nationalist and a patriot. And he really spoke and worked for Uganda. I got that from him. And I expected it because almost 3 decades before, I had heard of his name in the media all the time. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So he was very passionate as a nationalist. And everything that has been said about him in the parliament and everywhere else is really true of the nationalist and the patriot he was. That is at the national level. But as a person, he had his private side of life, which was admirable as well. He was very passionate about his kingdom, Uganda, really a good Muganda, very good Muganda. Very passionate about his Kabaka. And he was privately also passionate, I saw, in his religion as a Muslim. Publicly, he didn't seem to appear as the Muslims everybody knows, but he was actually quite passionate about his religion. And he taught me quite a lot and corrected me quite a lot on all the misconceptions I had about Islam. And because of the Right Honorable Mayanja, Abu Mayanja, I understood Islam and respected it more up to this day. I don't want to say more than that, but if people were to live very long, longer than we live normally, one would want to have Abu Mayanja as a nationalist, as a friend, I guess as a parent, and the rest of it forever. The world would be much better. Thank you.
You could ask me, how did I qualify to be so close to the intellectual? I was a debater like Abu Mayanja. I wondered, the love I saw between Professor Mazui and Abu Mayanja indicated that whenever Ali Mazui spent a week without seeing Abu Mayanja, his lectures would not succeed. I would like to admire the fraternity, the love, the joy, the two shared in commonality in promotion of intellectualism. As if that was not enough, I saw for myself, when I was a young person, the debate where there were two intellectual conquerors, namely Ali Mazui and Akena Adoko in the town hall. Ali Mazui defined the African intellectual as a man, a person who is fascinated by ideas and has acquired some skill to handle those ideas effectively. He was greatly opposed by Akena Adoko, but Abu Mayanja jumped up with the microphone and intellectually destroyed Akena Adoko. That kind of intellectual brotherhood is rare in society. But I saw it at full play when Abu Mayanja was arrested upon writing in the magazine called Transition. Abu Mayanja was sincere. He told Milton Obote that the delay in promoting Africans to the bench when he was citing the case of Udo Doma being the Chief Justice of Uganda was that most of the qualified people apparently were from Buganda. He broke the ice and people got excited. He was detained because of talking the facts and was only rescued when Idi Amin came to power. So I would like to pay tribute to the family of Abu Mayanja. Thank you for organizing such a wonderful interaction. I have not seen any of its kind in an intellectual capacity. I am excited. I would like to propose that there should be an annual public lecture in honor of Abu Mayanja. Lastly, for people who are distorting the conception of federalism, Abu Mayanja was very frank. He said that before you jump up with excitement to oppose federal governance, Tanzania is a federation. It has two confederations, Tanganyika and Zanzibar. And indeed, it is a federal state system. So he said that federalism is not a panacea. It is circumstantial. It evolves where there is need in terms of ethnic groupings, in terms of economics, in terms of language. Not every good, successful polity must necessarily be federal. There are circumstances where even small states like Switzerland succeed only when they have a federal connectivity. Thank you very much.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a family member, primary family member of Mayanja. I could not be a social associate of him because of the age difference. But I will not talk about what actually he stood for in politics, but I'll just give out some examples of my interaction with him, which brings out what has been said. I came to closely interact with Mayanja when I went for my interview for the scholarship at the Uganda government in Mengo. I'm actually a Uganda government product. Okay. And when I went for the interview, I don't think about me without talk about myself. I came out number 1 out of 300 applicants to go to the United Kingdom and study. And then I had offered civil engineering. Mayanja knew about my family, so a couple of days later he sent his assistant called Garabuzi. He came to pick him from school, and he took me to his office. Those who knows or remember the characteristics of Mayanja as a person, I found him seated in his chair. He never took attention of me. I had to wait for some time for him to speak. Then said, "Young man, you've done 2 mistakes. One, why didn't you tell me that you're father's son? Why didn't you come out very well? Because at school I used to be called Senkude. I was not Kaga. Then it came to his knowledge that I was a Kaga. And then that was fault number 1. Fault number 2, how do you choose engineering to noble courses? I said, like what? Law. And I said, sir, you know, sir, I think I've chosen engineering because that's what I like most, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, but if you choose, you know that there are only 2 people who went to Cambridge in this country who are actually educated, me and the Sabasaja. And if you choose law, if you change to law, and I know your grades are very good everywhere, I'll go and ask the Sabasaja and not send you to Cambridge, but I'll deliver you to Cambridge. That was very flattering. But all the same, I said, sir, I'll talk about it. And those who know about some politics in Uganda, he told me, Anyanansi Kirawanu. That means his position as Minister of Education. Now, second time I interact with him, well, not chronological order, where in Nairobi, during the difficult times of people who are actually migrating themselves to Nairobi and other countries. I was not there for political reasons, I was there for something else. And then they came in my simple house with his wife, Mariam, in attendance, of course behaving like a typical Muganda woman, or a wife. And then we discussed about because he just landed in the country. He wanted some little guidance despite our age difference. And of course I realized that accommodation was a very major issue. And I gave out my flat, or my maisonette, to them. And he profoundly said thanks so many times, so humbly. to me, a 15-year-old or 16 years old younger person to him. That is the humility of Mayanja. Then the third one, I was a technical officer or overall in charge of all technical matters in the rebuilding of the Nagarabi coronation grounds. I was working under the committee of the chairman was the late Semo Gerere and deputized by Mayanja. I'm saying all this just to bring out his character, which I can probably summarize. Mayanja, there were some little discussions there where he did not remember the right thing that should have happened before, and he said the wrong thing. And then when I corrected him, and he said, "Oh my God, I forgot my thinking hat at home. I moved to the wrong one." I said, "I'm sorry, sir." Those who don't know him or didn't know him, that could have been tantamount to arrogance. But I enjoyed his company because he was extremely intelligent. And indeed, he had forgotten his thinking hat at home. Probably last and not least was in my advisor to him, being advisor to him, in his property developments. He used to take me a lot of his properties, and I advise him accordingly. But what I'm trying to say here has been said by a lot of previous speakers, and that he was arrogant, intellectually very superior, and I respected that. And there were mainly two people who I really enjoyed listening to in their debates in Parliament, although I was not ready at that age to absorb what was going on in Parliament, and that was Mayanja and Grace Ibingila. I really liked their intellect and the way they were presenting themselves in the Parliament. And the other one is his simplicity when he came to ask me for a flat in Nairobi. But most importantly, that he is a man who really liked good for other people. And he was really asking himself, Anyanas Kirawan. He had already identified me as somebody who could go and become a minister of education because of certain other parameters in Mengo, before I was even really doing my A-level. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for listening to me, but it's a pleasure seeing Sam Kutesa, my boyhood friend. Thank you, seeing you on your feet again. Thank you.
At the balcony of England House, a Volkswagen came by, and a man looked out, and he asked, "Chino chichi?" I said, "Sebo, nyumba. Come out, yangu." So I got out, and he said, "Get in the car." I got in the car, and he said, "I am Abu Mayanja." He had left such a legacy at King's College that everyone Budonian, both the past and the present, at that time knew who Abu Mayanja was. He said, "Accompany me, I'm going to see my sister in Sabagan's house." So he drove on to meet his sister. I wonder whether she's here. Asia Kachama, is she here? Sorry? Oh, she was a classmate of my neighbor here at Budo. So that was the first time that I met Abu Mayanja. And we parted having visited the housemaster of England House at that time, a gentleman by the name of William Retsiba. Abu Mayanja, when we go to Retsiba's apartment, he stood out behind me and shouted, "William, are you there? Guess who I am?" And William Retsiba said, "Who? Abu Mayanja?" He was so well known. We parted at that time. 10 years later, I was an intern at the United Nations. At that time, the United Nations had only three Ugandans working for it. There was Apollo Chironde, who was a director, having been our ambassador for some years, and there was Thomas Makumbi, who was the director of personnel. And I was their junior, because Thomas Makumbi was my headmaster in the junior secondary school. We used to meet at a lunch table. And when we met on this particular occasion, which I remember, Thomas Makumbi told Chironde, you know what? Abu Mayanja has applied for a job at the United Nations. And he had some papers. And one of the papers had a writing on it. The man had written that Cambridge University had remarked that Abu Mayanja was the most brilliant lawyer that Cambridge had ever trained from East Africa. But he did not get the job. Why? Because when he wrote down the dependents, another one remarked, but have you seen the number of dependents? And Chironde, who was an equally naughty man, said, but why did he say that he had so many dependents? He should have kept quiet. We parted. He didn't get that job. While I was in exile in Nairobi, here was Mayanja. One of the most outrageous examples, damages caused by these bad governments, is the loss of intellectuals when they become just refugees in other countries. We used to meet Abu Mayanja and ask him, what are you doing? He was teaching English to secondary school boys in Nairobi. Can you imagine Abu Mayanja teaching just English? Poor governments, which we have been having, and we still have, by the way. I can't be shy about that. Then next time we met when he was a member of parliament, and so was I. The subject of discussion was the restoration of the kingdoms. It was decided that as far as Buganda was concerned, only 3 people should talk about the motion we are discussing. The first one to be suggested was Abu Mayanja. And several said, oh, no, Abu Mayanja should not say anything on this particular subject. Do you know that Abu Mayanja can abuse you without his knowing that he's abusing you? Abu Mayanja is the one who can say what you are saying is silly. And as far as he's concerned, he hasn't said anything nasty to you. All he has said is what we are saying is silly, but yourself, you are not silly. So he wasn't allowed to talk on that occasion. But as I said at the beginning, I am lucky in that I'm sitting next to the author of the book. So I have asked him, are you serious? Abu Mayanja talked about Switzerland? He said, yes, the professor here. I said, oh my God. I happen to be on the same line Abu Mayanja was thinking, that we could create a society, a country here which resembles Switzerland to a very good extent and have a very peaceful country. Professor, standing behind me, who is the president of Switzerland? Professor, can you mention his name? He says he doesn't know. Is it that Switzerland doesn't have a president? But Switzerland is one of the most peaceful, one of the most prosperous, one of the richest, one of the happiest countries in the world. Doesn't have a president. I've been saying Uganda can be the same without having a president. In fact, I still think and I maintain that Museveni should be the last president of Uganda. Oh, he says the last remark. I think that was important enough. The last president of Uganda, we should have none. We should have a revolving commission that acts as the presidency with a different chairman every year. We might have some peace from there. Nobody will then say, the Baganda are now eating, the Banyankole are now eating, the Acholis are now the bosses, and we've just gone like that. There will be no, probably, we might even reduce on the amount of money that's spent on the stupid thing called defense.
Thank you.
Our guest of honor, Honorable Mbabazi, Mulangira Dr. Kassim Nakibinge, Jaja wa Buganda, ate Jaja wa Obusiramu, Vice President Emeritus, and the Katikiro Emeritus. Colleagues we serve with, Ssaabasajja Kabaka, and colleagues we serve with in the government of Uganda, academicians, ladies and gentlemen, and the family of Babu Mayanja. I bring you greetings from Katikiro Charles Peter Mayiga, who is on leave, and from his government. On this occasion, when we are witnessing the launching of the autography of Oweekitiibwa Babu Mayanja, I want to congratulate the family and the author for bringing out the narrative about Mayanja from the point of view of Mayanja and from the reality as evidenced in the sources of the information the professor looked at. We witness narratives about individuals which are written in a biased way, simply because that individual or that leader or past leader is not available to defend him or herself when the family is also not defending him. So congratulations to the family for this narrative about Mayanja. I would paraphrase in Uganda, don't worry, BBS Terefina and CBS Radio in a few minutes. I can think about, I glanced through the book. I've not read it fully, but I glanced through the book. And I can only say 2 or 3 things when it comes to matters of Uganda vis-a-vis Mayanja. Or even before that, when you see in the title of a person, 3 aspects, he's a Oweekitiibwa, he's a honorable, he's a Hajj, then you know that this is a person who has brought his qualifications, skills, and experience to serve the community in the aspects of the Kingdom of Uganda, is serving the community of Uganda at large, and is serving the community of Muslim. That is Mayanja I've glanced in the book. That is the Mayanja whom I've seen, who had unquestionable loyalty to his king and the Kingdom of Uganda. He's a person who served as the Minister of Education, as we've heard. He's a person who lived through a very difficult time. When you glance through the book, at the time when Uganda was about to lose the letter B, and we're having the country known as Uganda. As Apollo Makubuya would say, that we see a formation of Uganda by Buganda losing the word B, the letter B, and then you have Uganda. There was a difficult question, and that question still exists, and that is what Mayanja brought on the table to answer that question. I salute him and all other ladies and gentlemen of that time who had to think through what Buganda would be in the big entity known as Uganda. At all times, he had it at the heart. He was there to defend it. He was there to ensure that Buganda exists within a bigger entity known as Uganda. We salute him. His legacy still lives. 3 people or 2 were introduced here. We see Owechitiibwa Mariam Mayanja serving. We see 2 sons, Owechitiibwa Omar Mayanja and Isa Mayanja. Uthman, you are also Omukungu. Where is Uthman Mayanja? Uthman sits on the Buganda Kingdom Audit and Risk Committee, which I chair. Akachika Karondo Simbi. So, Mayanja, that is Mayanja to the kingdom. His input is indelible ink as far as Uganda is concerned. He provides us who are still serving and all who are coming to serve a role model to look up to in Mayanja. So we commend him and also commend and invite everybody to read the book and understand the contribution of Mayanja. Lastly, the message to anybody carrying the name Mayanja. Are you here? I don't know whether you know what you are carrying. You are carrying an intangible asset. It will be a shame that one of the Mayanja'S is the cause of soiling the name of Owechitiibwa Honorable Alhaji Abu Mayanja as far as Islam concerned. It will be a shame that one of the Mayanja'S is a cause for the erasing of the name of Mayanja from Buganda Kingdom. It will be a shame that one of the Mayanja yeisanga bwayagala in the country Uganda. So the family, you have that asset to always keep that high. As one of his names said, Professor will correct me, the names, I think he says Baliki Jukira, right? Is that right? I just saw that name on the cover of the page, I think, of the book, and I say, hey, Baliki Jukira. Indeed, we shall always remember Honorable Owechitiibwa Abu Mayanja. I thank you very much. Sasajja Kabaka Awangale. Just 1 minute, otherwise you'll have no news on the BBS Telefina if I don't paraphrase what I've said in Uganda. 2 minutes. Tuyozayoza family, wamune omuwandiisi professor, olw'okuwandiika ebyafaayo bya Mayanja nga abiwandiika abisinziira ku ebintu ebyesigamizibwako nga byogera ku Mayanja mu butuufu bwe. Mwebale nnyo mwebalire ddala. Mayanja tumulaba ng'omuntu ow'omugaso ennyo eyali afaayo ennyo era afaayo ennyo ayagala ennyo obwakabaka bwe ne kabaka we. Era tukyamulaba ng'omuntu, era tumulaba ng'omuntu yakozesa obukugu bwe n'obumanyirivu okulaba nti Buganda ebeerawo mu nsi ennene eyitibwa Uganda. Nga Uganda yeeyubula okuva mu Buganda ng'ekigambo B, ennyukuta B eva ku bu tufunaani Uganda. Mayanja yaleeta obukugu bwe nga munnamateeka okulaba nti ekyo kibeerawo. Lwekyo omukululo gwe guli mu bwino atasanguka era tumuyozaayoza. Atuwa ekyokulabirako nga ffe abakyaweereza nti twandyagadde naffe tubenga Bamayanja okuweereza Ssaabasajja Kabaka, okuweereza obusiraamu, okuweereza n'ensi yaffe Uganda. N'olwekyo ekitabo kino mukisome mufune bingi ebyafaayo. Famire ya Mayanja bw'oba ng'olina erinnya lye bayita Mayanja kijja kuba kya buswavu nti gw'ovuddeko okwonoona erinnya lya Owekitiibwa Honorable Alhaji Mayanja eri Ssaabasajja Kabaka, eri gavumenti ne Uganda, eri n'abantu ba Uganda bonna. Indeed Mayanja ng'ennyero ligamba balikijjukira. Ssaabasajja Kabaka awangaale.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, Right Honorable Chief Guest, Your Excellency, former Vice President, Deputy Katikiro, abebitiibwa abakungu okuva e Mengo, former ministers, Honorable Shasi, good to see you. Abebitiibwa mwenna, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is a pleasure to join you as we launch the biography of a great leader in this country of Uganda. I wish to congratulate and thank the author, Professor Kasozi, for having put on permanent record the works of the late Abu Mayanja. Professor Kasozi is an accomplished intellectual. He has authored so many books about the history of Uganda, different biographies. But it is in this book where we have worked closely. And I'm happy that Allah has kept him alive to see when we launch this book. He was very passionate about it. And of the 3 calls I used to get from him frequently, 4 were always briefing me how far he has gone with the book, telling me he has sent me the flash disk, the manuscript, and telling me if anything happens, make sure that this book is published. I thank you and I congratulate you for accomplishing this task. Second is to thank the family through Mr. Othman Mayanja for having organized this function where we come to launch this biography. It has been a long time, but it's good we are here. As all of us know, and all have said so, Haji Abu Mayanja was a nationalist, was a Pan-Africanist, was an international figure, was a Muganda, a Muslim, and an intellectual. We are very happy that all this has been captured in this book, which we invite you to read and internalize, and you get the glimpse of his contribution to this country. 3 is to thank the family for having invited our chief guest to preside over this function, because the Right Honorable worked with the Honorable Mayanja in government. They were together in exile, so he was the best person suited to come and preside over this function. We thank you for having spared time and preside over this function. Mr. Mayanja, or Haji Abu Mayanja, lived his life to the fullest. He is survived by so many children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. But I've always challenged these children that Mayanja was a nationalist, was a Muganda. It is very good you are serving in Mengo, but you are missing on the national scene. We want to see you in Parliament. And always the response I get, which is very courageous from these fellows, is just a smile. And I always conclude that if Mayanja was alive, then yali mpologome yazaala bukapa obungi. Lastly is to invite you, Right Honorable Chief Guest, to come and address the gathering and thereafter preside over the function. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Highness, Prince Kasim Nachibinge Kakunguru, for inviting me to speak. Your Excellency Edward Sekandi, the former Vice President of Uganda, when I arrived and found the former Vice President here, I nearly caused the problem by saying, please, Vice President, how can I be chief guest in your presence? But being the humble man he has always been, he allowed me to go ahead. And I would like to thank the family for inviting me to be the chief guest. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests in your various capacities, the list is too long. Near everyone here is a dignitary. So I recognize your capacities. The Abu Kachama Mayanja family, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Good evening. It is with a profound sense of honor and humility that I stand before you today as the chief guest at the launch of the biography of a most remarkable man, a true son of Uganda, Abukacha Mayanja. This biography, penned by my old friend I had not seen in a long time, Professor Abudu Kasozi, and with a foreword by His Highness Prince Kasim, is not just a narrative. It's a beacon that illuminates the complex and challenging history of Uganda's journey to independence and beyond. In the pages I have read it, most people who spoke had not read it. I have read it. And in the pages of this biography, we journey with Mayanja from the early years of his life in Ngogwe, to 1952, a pivotal year when he took up the mantle as Secretary General of the Uganda National Congress, UNC, Uganda's first nationwide political party, to the year 2005, marking the end of his earthly journey. His story is inseparable from the tale of Uganda itself, woven into the very fabric of our nation's quest for freedom, unity, and progress. Abu Mayanja was not just a political figure. He was a visionary who saw beyond the struggles of the present into the promise of a brighter future. His tireless efforts in the fight for independence, and I would like to request Professor Kasozi not to worry about the word struggle, because struggle these days, we know it in the context of armed struggle, but there are other struggles where they may not necessarily even be physical, they may be mental, but they are struggles. Mayanja and many of his time were involved in efforts fighting for independence. And that clearly was a struggle. So his tireless efforts in the fight for independence were not confined to the borders of Uganda. His advocacy and diplomacy spanned continents, from the classrooms and corridors of power in the United Kingdom to the far reaches of the globe, where he sought and found solidarity with those who believed in the cause of freedom. As independence loomed on the horizon, Mayanja'S focus shifted towards a monument. You know, when you read the book, I learned quite a lot. I thought I knew enough about Uganda's struggle for freedom, but the meticulous research Professor Kasozi has done, which is reflected in this book, demonstrated to me that I did not know enough. And when you read it, you will discover many things that are not publicly known. The things they did, the role of Abu Mayanja in building Uganda as a nation, his interactions with other political forces in the world, in the UK, in Soviet Union, in China, in Egypt, all this in Ghana, these were places that I did not even hear from Abu himself that he had visited in this struggle for the independence of Uganda. And I knew in broad terms about the role of Karechezi, who was the UNC representative in Cairo, and the circumstances under which he died. And clearly, a lot of work was done. It was indeed a struggle. So with a deep understanding of Uganda's diverse cultural and political landscape, Abu Mayanja worked tirelessly and relentlessly towards the creation of a united nation, advocating for the celebration of our differences as a source of strength. The point that I think my friend, my brother, Israel Mayengo was making, that we can prosper even when we live with our divergences. It is possible, it has happened elsewhere, and even today, we still live as we were at that time in terms of the divergences that the diversity that existed at the time. His commitment to democracy and the rule of law was unwavering, even in the face of personal risk. His detention without trial in 1968 by the government of President Milton Obote for merely exercising his democratic rights showcases the sacrifices he was willing to make for the principles he held dear. Yet his spirit remained unbroken and his resolve only strengthened. During the tumultuous times in the early 1980s, when I had the privilege of working alongside him in Nairobi, which the Prince mentioned, I witnessed firsthand his brilliance and his profound commitment to the cause of freedom. Together, we labored over the NRM 10-point program and other revolutionary documents that would later serve as blueprints for our struggle against dictatorship in this country. His insights were invaluable, his guidance wise, and his companionship during those difficult times was a source of great inspiration and comfort. He was the most hospitable colleague I had worked with. I'm sure Mariam, my friend Mariam, remembers the many visits I paid to them, the many times we stood out in the compound working on those documents, and the many cups of teas and coffees that you served that maybe reflect the size of my body today. Tonight, as we celebrate the launch of this biography, we are not just commemorating the life of Abu Mayanja. We are reaffirming our commitment to the ideals he fought for: unity, democracy, and the unyielding pursuit of a better Uganda for all her people. Let this biography serve as a testament to his legacy and a guide for future generations. May the story of Abu Mayanja, I decided not to repeat really what is in the book, but to pick out the principal points, because I hope you will all read that book in detail. And may the story of Ab Mayanja inspire us all to dream bigger, to work harder, and to continue building on the foundations laid by our forefathers. May we never forget the sacrifices made for the freedom we enjoy today. And may we always strive to make Uganda a beacon of hope and a model of prosperity and democracy in Africa. I encourage all of you to read this biography and to reflect on the lessons and insights that it offers. Let us honor the memory of Ab Mayanja, the great leader, by carrying forward his vision of a better and brighter future for this country, Uganda. Thank you.
Amanya agange nze Hajjat Hadija Naabawanuka Mayanja. Ndi mukyala first wa Haji Mayanja Abu Mugenzi. Twafumbiriganwa mu 1968 February. Omukisa gwali mubi, ebiseera by'obufuzi by'obote yali abali bubi ng'ab'ebyobufuzi. Waliwo abadde mwami Kenny Lukyamuzi ng'agamba yasibibwa olw'okubeera alina bintu yawandiika mu magazini bagiyitanga Transition. Yali yakinya naye nga bagipublishingira wano. Kaakati bye yawandiika ng'ayogeranga ku byobufuzi nga bali bifaanana. Naye n'akwatibwa. Naye bwe yali nga tannaba kukwatibwa, omulangira omugenzi Prince Badru Kakungu ne Sheikh Ali Kulumba ne Sheikh omulala Haji Busungu n'abasiraamu abalala bakwatibwa. Kati bwe bakwatibwa ate nga Haji naye yali akolagana wamu ng'abasiraamu naye naffe tufuna obweraliikirivu bayinza omukwata. Era twayinza okuloza nti oba adduke naye n'agamba nti bwe nadduka bayinza okumukwatira mu kkubo. Kale n'agumirawo n'atadduka. So oluvannyuma nga bali mulangira bamaze okubakwata era naye yakimbibwa ne bamutwala. Bwe bamutwala tuteeruzira mu upper prison. Upper prison n'esimu kyetegeeza naye upper prison yekomera mwobeera nti bw'ogenda okulaba omusibe wo waliwo endabirwamu eri sound proof. Bye mwogera nga babirikodinga. So nga tosobola kwogera, tolina kyama kyogera naye tosobola mukwatako wabula babirikodinga oluvannyuma bafunamu information gye baagala. So twabeera mu buzibu bunene nnyo era nsazeewo njogere ku ebyo kubanga ekitabo tekibyogerako ekyabadde published. Naye ngenze yali naye ate njagadde ensonga eyo ngiggyeyo. Bwe yabeera ng'ali mu kkomera ne bamuteekako omusango nti yawandiika ki seditious article nga gwe musango gwali gumuvunaanibwa. Omugenzi Mustapha Mutyaba n'agendako e UK n'ayogerako n'aba Amnesty International. Aba Amnesty Haji Mayanja ne bamuweereza lawyer Sadingo Futu, yali lawyer wa Queen. Najja n'amuwolereza n'edita wa Transition naye n'afuna lawyer okuva e Nairobi. Omusango oluvannyuma lw'oguwulira ne beejeerezebwa nti the article was not seditious. Naye ekyomukisa obubi era baabazaayo mu kkomera. Bwe babazaayo ne mbuuza ow'ekkomera omukulu w'ekkomera nti ate ono gwe bejjeereza ate lwaki baagize eki baamuzizzaayo. Omukulu w'ekkomera n'agamba nti baawandiise mu fayiro nti abadde atabulatabula obusiraamu. Mu biseera ebyo waaliwo ekibiina ekya NAM, National Advancement Summit for Muslims, kyali kyatandikibwawo ni Kyoni Akibaro. kati nga muzirimu community bagiri bubi nnyo. Muzirimu community erimu omulangira nabana abalala bonna Bahajabu Mayanja Basheke Kuluma nga bali Kibuli naye nga baagala kumenyawo ekitundu ekyo. So bwetyo n'abeera mu kkomera okumala emyaka 2. Twafuna obuzibu ne tugenda wano na wali naye era oluvannyuma mu October 1970 ate ye yateebwa Obote yamuta naye ng'omulangira n'omulangira Kakungu ne Sheeke Kulumba n'abalala bo tebabatwalako mu kkooti baasigala bajja ebali. Kati oluvannyuma Hajji Mayanja okubeera nti yateebwa ate ki Amini bw'awamba n'ata omulangira Kakungulu ne banne be baali bakwatibwa. Era mu mbeera eyo Amini Hajji Mayanja n'amuwa obwa minisita obw'education. Kakati naffe oluvannyuma lw'okubeera nga avudde mu kkomera twali twakafubiga lwe baamutwala emyezi 8 naye kati olubuto lwavaamu olw'ebizibu bye nalina naye bw'akomawo ne nfuna olubuto ne tuzaala omwana waffe asooka Abubakar Bazanye mu 1971 May. Ate oluvannyuma Mukama ne twogera tuzaale abaana baffe abalala bada be baana abataano abalenzi. Uthumani y'omu kubo ne Umaru Mayanja ne Badru Mayanja n'abalala. Kaakati twagezaako nnyo nga bwe tusobola okulaba nti abaana baffe tubakuza mu ddiini ate n'okusoma bino ebibagamba ebya secular. Era Mukama n'abawa ne basoma bulungi. Era nsigala nga nkubiriza abazadde abalina abaana mubakulize mu nnono yaffe mu ddiini ate awamu n'obusiraamu. Era tugibasomesa obusiraamu babeere nga bajja kutambula bulungi nga taata waabwe bwe yatambulanga newankubadde yasobola okusoberako n'Ebungereza naye era yasigala nga musiraamu owannamaddala. Neebaza nnyo Dr. Professor Kasozi olw'omulimu omunene gwakoze. Yatuyitangamu era emu ku information gye yateeka mu kitabo eyo byemu information gye tulina okumuwa. Neebaza nnyo n'abateeseteese omukolo guno. Saba Mukama abongere omukisa.